Hello, I'm Brian Fox. This is my channel and your channel too. I hate rock music. And of course, I love rock music. I want to make that very clear. It should be clear by now. So anyway, let's get into the group that I'm going to be talking about in this video called Group Therapy. And this is another one where both our albums showed up in cutouts. I bought them 50 some odd years ago, 55 years, whatever. Probably paid about $1 a piece for them. They weren't exactly what I was looking for, but they eventually won me over, and over the years I've grown to enjoy them even more. And that's particularly unusual because their first LP came out on RCA 1968. Was an album called People Get Ready, and it's almost all covers. And I generally don't really gravitate towards albums that have a lot of covers on them, but I definitely can make an exception with these guys. They did a great job picking the songs, and they do really good interpretations of them. So let's get into the band a little bit. They got Ray Kennedy on vocals, Art Del Gudico on guitar, Jerry Guida on organ, Tommy Burns on drums, and Michael Lamont also on drums. And I don't know if they just used two different drummers or they had two drummers. I didn't find any information saying one way or another. But another one of those New York bands that has a heavy Hammond organ in it. And I've talked about this in a lot of videos. That seem to be a real East Coast thing where a lot of those bands just seem to have keyboard players in them. Sometimes they didn't seem to really need them, like Mountain. They had Steve Knight on keyboards. It just seemed to be an East Coast tradition. Obviously, Mountain did fine as when they eventually became a trio. And you got a guitar player like Leslie West. You don't really need a keyboard player in there. In fact, their biggest hit, Mississippi Queen, you can barely tell there's any keyboards on there. Really, they're very buried unless you listen to the album. So Group Therapy. So they put out the first album 1968, People Get Ready, and then they had a second LP on Phillips in 1969 called 37 Minutes of Group Therapy, where they do a lot more originals. Although they do a really actually pretty good version of River Deep Mountain High, which they release as a 45. But the thing that gets you with them is just their high energy. And they opened a UK tour for Moby Grape in 1968, and that's where they ended up getting a lot of attention. And at that time, they were doing mostly covers, and they just really impressed people with the energy level. And boy, they really captured it on these records. I'm kind of surprised because Lou Reisner ended up producing Group Therapy, and he the records are kind of muddy. They're not really what I expect from the guy that did the Three Man Army Army albums, for example. So it's kind of muddy, but it doesn't really take away from the record. Having that layer of grime and grunge on this high energy, soulful rock really kind of works. And that's the thing that ultimately wins you over. They do really cool arrangements, even on all the covers. They do some pretty interesting interpretations, but the arrangements are really cool. A lot of great breaks. They obviously knew they had a really killer drummer because he's mixed really loud in the mix, and you can tell he's just bashing the shit out of those drums. So I got to really hand it to the drummer on this record, on these records. And then Ray Kennedy is an exceptional vocalist. I mean, they couldn't really pull off this stuff as well as they do, and it wouldn't be near as great a record, except he's a really good singer. And he likes to scream a lot. There's a lot of high energy on these records, and he lets loose when he feels it. And so there's a lot of great screams and enthusiasm. He hits some really great high notes. He's got a really great range, got a really nice vibrato, and even the slow stuff, he just has a beautiful voice. So that goes a long way, making the band as good as they are. And then there's some pretty cool fuzz guitar throughout it. Not so much on the first album, but on the second album, there's a lot of really nice 60s style fuzz guitar, but channeled into this powerhouse soulful rock. They kind of remind me of Vanilla Fudge if they were more prone to doing soul. But that's the thing that defines this band. I think they're just really so high energy and so soulful. It's just really infectious, and they just keep it up from start to finish. So I'm going to run through the songs a little bit. The first LP has a bunch of covers. They actually start out with Foxy Lady, which was fairly contemporary to the time, and do a pretty respectable version of that. And then they do a couple classics like Hey Joe, Morning Dew, which a lot of 60s bands covered. But then they do People Get Ready, Let It Be Me, Expressway to Your Heart. Um, do really good versions of all these covers, and their credentials as a soulful rock band are not to be doubted. So then you get into the second album, and it starts out with the Remember What You Said, um, great soulful rocker. Then it goes into Wait, which is a little more dark and moody, and I swear I hear a mellotron in there, which is really unusual for a band like this at that time, particularly to be using a mellotron. So I'm not sure why they would use it on this record, because it's just not really that kind of record. And on River Deep Mountain High, I hear either a harp or some guitar lines that are sped up, which of course in 1969 they would have had to do manipulating the tape. But really weird to hear that in there. But very respectable version of River Deep Mountain High. And then they get into another whole batch of originals. A Very Happy Day, I Gotta Live, just powerhouse rockers with everything firing on all pistons, and Ray Kennedy really delivering some really astonishing vocal performances. Can't Stand Loving You Baby also seems to have some Mellotron on it. Another just great soulful rock tune. I Must Go, another real one that's just super soulful. Ray Kennedy just delivers a really wonderful vocal performance on it. And then Cheer Up Baby and Willie after that. Those are both, once again, just really high energy, soulful rockers with everything on full. And they just really have so much energy. They kind of have the same energy as MC5, just not as guitar oriented by any stretch. And then they finish up with I Can't Believe It, which is a total nice soulful crooner, and Ray Kennedy once again just transcends. Uh, just great stuff. And so a little unusual record for me, but everything on it is just so strong, and there's so much energy, and the rhythm section's so great. The fuzz guitar's great. The material's really cool, and Ray Kennedy is a great vocalist. So I really recommend it. Once again, for a lot of my regulars, it may not be what they're looking for, but I think after all these years, I think these records are really great, and I'm sad I didn't give them more of a chance. When I first got them in cutouts years ago, there were a couple of those records where it wasn't really what I was looking for at the time. I filed it away in my collection, and then I finally came back to them with a different state of mind by the time the 90s and 2000s rolled around, and particularly an album that's mostly covers. Um, I gotta say they really won me over, and I think both these albums are excellent and great to have in the collection. So Group Therapy, check them out. Uh, Definitely unlike most anything else I've talked about on here recently, although there are a number of bands kind of out there like that, but not of this quality. I'm Brian Fox. Thanks for watching I Hate Rock Music.